going on, everybody? This is Bullets to Bedpans MZ here. We got Detox. And
Hello.
today we have the pleasure of talking with Dr. Joe McDaniel. How's it going, sir?
I'm doing great. How about you guys?
Out fucking standing.
She said
Good
it.
to see y'all.
Good to see you too. Good to see you too. So, he's an emergency care physician with more than 20 years experience under his belt. He's a dad. He's a husband. He's also an Air Force veteran with, what was it, Doc? 22 years, right?
37.
Oh, no way.
37. Well, not Air Force, but 37 years in the military.
How did I goof that up? Okay, so we'll have to
No.
talk about that too, because you
Sure.
started off as a coastie, right?
Correct. Coast Guard.
Okay, that's why my math is off. Okay,
Yep.
Cool.
You were a
So we'll have-
coastie?
I was
What?
out of high school. I was in the Coast Guard.
What were you?
I was a rescue swimmer. And
Oh.
before that, I was in avionics. I kind of transitioned from avionics into rescue swimming.
Oh, you weren't poop swabby. Okay.
Yeah. So first year was at a small boat station where I was spending most of my time over the side throwing my guts out, realizing that I couldn't be on a boat, and then went into aviation right after that. So spent the first 5 years of my career in the Coast Guard, then the next 4 years in the Navy, and then the rest of it in the Air Force.
Were you on the ships in the Navy?
No, I was at
Navy.
I was actually on a A-10 base at Whidbey Island, Washington, working on A-10s. So I was avionics there.
All right. All right.
I would love to get a picture of Doc in the whites get up for the
For the Navy. Never wore it.
Never wore it.
Never wore it. No.
Was that refusal or didn't have them back then?
No. Because I was in a electronics shop, we didn't wear the whites.
Oh, that's on the ship,
that-
MZ. That's on the ship. Get it?
I wouldn't know the difference.
I saw a Navy ship once. That's about my experience.
So 30, you said 37, right?
37 total, yeah.
I stand corrected.
From 1984 till 2000 and what was it, 2 years ago? I retired from the Guard. Yeah.
84.
Yep.
See, I think MZ's a baby, and now I'm like, ooh, I'm a baby. I was only 12.
He's got a little salt on him, a little salt. He's marinated.
And a lot less hair.
It's just great. That's okay. It makes you distinguished.
That's right.
But ended up finishing out your career as the chief medical officer for the disaster response team, which literally makes him the master of disaster,
Right.
which I think is fair to say. So I had the privilege and honor of working with Doc Mac for a few years. We were at the same duty station here in Texas, so I've gotten to see him in action a little bit. And then it sounds like from there he went right back into the medical field still, but in a different way, doing EMS. He's working with District 7 Fire and Rescue right here in San Antonio and taking on some new adventures with concierge medical service. And we'll have to ask what that looks like. To get us started, I mean, when we look at Doc Mac from like the whole person standpoint, he literally hits each circle on the Venn diagram, being military and EMS, working clinical side too. I mean, you are absolutely perfect. I'm so glad that you took the time to come and hang out on Bullets to Bedpans today. Not to mention, Doc Mac is absolutely freaking hilarious. We'll plug that in there. You guys will see. Let's start at the beginning, Doc. Like, how did you get started? We know you mentioned multiple branches. Like, what got you into medicine? How old were you? What did that look like? And was this always the plan?
No, not really. So I went to a small farm school in Ohio and was a terrible high school student. So I was voted most likely to be found face down in a gutter. And so, as most high school students that have absolutely no direction, my parents hated me and didn't want me in the house. So my options were work at McDonald's or go into the military. So,
Dang.
yeah. Well, I actually went to college for 2 years in engineering and found out that I couldn't do math. So basically, yeah, I know. It's terrible to do engineering, not know how to do math. So I went to the recruiter, got into the Coast Guard. My brother was actually in the Coast Guard at the time. So I was initially going to go into the Air Force, but they talked me out of it to go into the Coast Guard. They said it was a lot better. So I went to basic training in 1984 and got immediately stationed at a small boat station and was there for about a year. I was on the heavy surf motor lifeboat doing rescues, and this was before you actually go into an A school to designate as whatever you're going to do. So I was swimming off the boats and mostly throwing up on those things because they were just terrible. They're built like weebles, basically. So if you're in dead calm water, those things list 30 degrees from side to side, and motion sickness was not my friend.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was terrible. I always had to clean the side of the boat when we got back,
Oh,
which is it's a very good designation to have when you're at a small boat station. So we were doing comms one time we had a helicopter show up and drop a basket, and I kind of looked up there and I go, that's where I need to be. I got to get off this boat and get in there. So I went into A school for avionics and got into helicopter search and rescue for the rest of that part of the career out of Elizabeth City, North Carolina. And then I was fortunate to meet my wife at that point. And
By the way, I'll
oh,
put that
thank
up
you. I
there.
appreciate. Yeah, she's amazing. So the first thing that hit my head when we got married is, crap, I got to feed her. Coast Guard's not going to help me do it. I got to
God.
find yeah, I'm saying I got to feed her and clothe her and stuff. It's kind of my
Water her.
responsibility. Yep, exactly. So I got out of the Coast Guard and decided to go to college. And of course, she was going to college too. And on the way across country, we were leaving North Carolina where I was stationed, going to Oregon because she's from Alaska.
Oh, wow.
She was talking to me about what I wanted to do when I grew up. And me being 24 years old at the time, didn't have any clue. And so we kind of discussed career paths. And I said, what job basically could I do that I'm never going to get laid off and make a lot of money? She says, well, you could be a doctor. And I said, okay, I'll be a doctor. That sounds good.
So nonchalant.
And that was the decision. So we went across to Oregon, went to college, finished my undergrad degree in management communications, which is always a good degree to have for medicine. Yeah, everybody else is doing biology. I'm doing management communications, which is I think you can line a bird cage with it.
We have to make a PSA here, though. We have to make a PSA in the middle of this. So for all the audience and all the parents that are listening, your kid can be a fuck up early in life and still be successful later. So did you hear that? Like, can
Absolutely.
have crap grades and still become a doctor. So
yeah,
don't
go to school in
despair.
Ohio, be a nobody, and still become a doctor. It's very possible.
There you
You're doing
go.
pretty damn good for yourself,
We're
Doc.
giving hope to the community.
Yeah, I was partially, I think I had Asperger's too, which made it even more fun. That's probably why I was not so good at math. So we finally finished undergraduate, and then I got into medical school. The interesting story about medical school was I went to the University of Oregon, which is one of the top 10 molecular biology schools in the United States. And
Nerd alert.
yeah, well, not really, because the advisor for pre-med told me that I'd never get into medicine. She kept telling me every year, you need to pick another a job description. She says you'll never get in.
Because
She
of your
probably knew me really
grades
well.
or because why?
No, my grades were good. I'm not really sure why. I think it was my demeanor. So
I can't imagine why.
so interestingly, I took the MCAT and did pretty well. Took the MCAT again and actually did worse. So I went with the first one. By the way, if you're going to go into medicine, be good at taking tests because it's really a pain in the ass when you're not. I hate standardized tests. Wasn't that good at it. Well, anyway, I applied for med school and ended up getting a acceptance letter before anybody else at the University of Oregon got an interview. So I walked into her office, put the acceptance letter on her desk. I go, I don't think I'll need you anymore. And that was when I realized that, the goal was being met. I went to medical school for 4 years. And because of my military background, I went into something called HPSP, which is the Health Professional Scholarship Program. Yeah. Immediately became a second lieutenant in the Air Force, which, by the way, when you're a second lieutenant, you have to salute everybody. Fucking person.
Oh, yes, you do.
And make damn good coffee.
Yeah.
You have to glue your hand to your eyebrow. That's what.
Yeah, because there's nobody you can't. They're the only people you can't salute as second lieutenant.
Wait, I have to tell you my second lieutenant story though, really fast. So we all went to. Well, it was MIMSO at the time. I don't know what you went through, but you should have gone through something similar, which was like OTS Baby Light. And
It's OCS for dummies is what it
yeah,
was.
that's what it was, right? It was ridiculous. Well, anyway, so we have to go around and we have these like blue, like sapphire blue shirts and shorts. And then they stick this trucker hat of the same color. They put this gold bar, right? The second lieutenant bar right in the middle of it. So you look like a complete moron to begin with. And if it's not any better, then they throw, if you're going to the gym or anything, you have to have a towel wrapped around your neck and tucked in your shirt. I swear to God, it was just like, let's see how stupid we can make them look. Well, they succeeded. And so I'm walking along with a friend and I see this guy off in the distance walking towards us. And I'm like, oh man. And it was like the first person we were passing. And I had to figure out if I saluted or he saluted. In my mind, I was like, I just salute, period. Because I'm sure that they all outrank me. So I'm marching along. My friend's marching along. And all of a sudden, I could see as he's getting closer, his whole demeanor changed and he stiffened up and he started to almost walk in cadence, right? And I'm like, that's weird. And he walked right by us. He was an enlisted guy. There was senior NCO academy was going on at the time. He was a master, senior master sergeant, walked right by me. And my friend looks at me, she goes, wasn't he supposed to salute? I'm like, I'm not asking. I just kept going. There you go. That was the beginning of my career.
I have a very similar story. I was actually going to the commissary as a butter bar, and I had been enlisted for 5 years. So out of the commissary comes this master chief, and he has everything on his sleeve is gold.
Oh yeah.
So he's one of these guys. He's a high functioning dude, and he's walking towards me, and I'm walking towards him with a butter bar. And I think I did a matrix move. I actually bent over backwards, flew upside down, and went under a car and went behind it and acted like I was tying my shoe. And he
Don't mind me,
around,
I've just got to change this tire.
yeah. So I did this move, and I'm pretty sure he saw me because it was pretty amazing. I didn't think I could flex like that. And so I'm hiding behind the car, down, acting like I'm tying my shoe. And he said, "Sir." And I look up and I go, "Hey, Master Chief." And he goes, "Were you trying to avoid saluting me?" I said, "Yeah, I just didn't want you to salute me, man. I was in the Navy I said, I can't see you saluting butter bar." And he just started laughing, popped me a salute, and then he went on. Oh, I hated that butter bar. It was awful.
Me too. It was the worst. And it's worse for you when you already had been in the military. I was green. I just walked in the door, be a nurse. That was the end of the story. What they did to us though was really horrible. They filled us full of BS. You are an officer. They will follow your orders, blah, 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 all this stuff. We don't know. I don't know anything. I'm like, okay. And then you walk out and I'm like, hey, can you get me the whatever? And the medics would be sitting in the break room eating. They'd look up and they'd be like, it's in the other room, ma'am. And they wouldn't even. And I'm all confused. I'm like, okay, that doesn't, I guess. Okay. And I was just, I was a country girl. I didn't know. I was like, all right, well, I'll go get it.
I did ROTC at the UTSA several years ago and didn't pan out. But my last semester there, I remember telling them, the ones that were about to graduate and actually go into the real Air Force, the smartest thing you can do is find a senior NCO and stick to them like stink on shit, because
Right.
that's where you're going to learn. They're the ones who are going to have your back and
If they
fend
like
the
you.
wolves off of you. But the dumbest thing you could do is go in there and try telling them, hey, I'm important. I know everything. And you're going to
Oh,
listen to
you'll
me. They're going
die.
to eat you the hell up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
See,
funny.
that's why they call them seeing eye sergeants, because
See,
every one of us had one.
it's
Because there was
true.
no way I could go through the paperwork. I didn't know what the fuck was going on. I
Yep.
didn't know how they would tell me. They would speak in code
But you
during
knew.
these meetings.
You knew, like, I didn't know. I was direct commission, never, I didn't even have my dad was in the military for 2 years or Vietnam. And he got sent to Germany. I mean, literally no military background at all. I got hazed.
Yeah.
I learned very, very fast.
At the 149th, they got used to whenever they had some kind of discussion about what we had to do, I would just kind of turn around and they go, "We got you, sir."
Yep.
Because they
moved
knew I
on.
had no idea what they were talking about half the time.
We'll let you know where to go.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. I threw us off
We got
track.
you.
I just had to tell the story. I thought it was funny. Okay. So
That is good.
you had met your wife. You are now going to feed her and pet her
Yeah.
and love her like your own.
And be
So
a
got out of undergraduate, went to medical school, and then immediately went into the Air Force. at the level 1 trauma center at SAMC here and Wilford Hall, what's through the Air Force. Did my 4 years of residency. We had to do an internship first and then 3 years of residency. And then I went, became a staff at SAMC and Wilford Hall. And then while I was staff there, I started moonlighting in the civilian side, got out in about 2005 initially, was in private practice, went back into the Air National Guard, was doing that as well. So I was doing private practice in the Air National Guard right after I got out of active duty. And then while I've been in private practice, I got into EMS leadership and started a concierge practice basically. So I'm doing emergency medicine, the EMS stuff, and then the concierge. As I get older, that's usually the typical transition to do something a little bit lighter than emergency medicine. But I'm one of the few probably ER docs that have been in it for 20 some years and don't feel any burnout. I think I'm kind of built for emergency medicine. I like the trauma. So I'm still going strong when it comes to the ER.
That's impressive
And
because, whew, let me tell you, I actually made this comment today. I was talking to somebody and I said, we were talking about nursing and I said, if you see a nurse that's still floor nursing and they're at like 25, 30 years, I'm like, they're rare. They're like unicorns because most people are burnt out 20
and they're not
plus
really
years.
burnt out by the patients as much as the
It's not the
administration
patient.
stuff, and
Yeah,
it's all the other stuff.
it is.
I mean, it really
Bureaucratic,
is true that,
political, red tape bullshit.
well,
Well,
not to mention during COVID, they tortured everybody
yeah.
and made up for it with pizza.
Right. And
And
they weren't, this still rocks. Well, just, I can't figure this part out. So I remember, because I was getting out during COVID and I was following this pretty close. And some of it was because I'm like, God, please don't stop loss me. I was part of it. But I was watching this and I was a nerd. I was trending numbers and looking at all this stuff. And I just remember a couple things that were kind of going through my head was one, the nurses, okay, and the same thing with the doctors, right? Nurse. They were not all the same, right? So there were nurses getting
right.
furloughed. And then there were nurses that were highly sought after, ICU, anything with CU after where it was getting picked up on there, emergency medicine, anybody that remotely knew event you were on, like you were getting hired, right? So that's what's going on. And then other nurses were getting furloughed, right? Clinic nurses, med surg nurses. I think obstetrics was still there only because they got to. Where are you going to put the baby, right? You got to have obstetrics. But I mean, if they could, I think they would have furloughed them too at that point. But what was kind of happening is they weren't giving raises for this kind of acute setting. They were doing none of this. So the nurses got smart, and some of the other different fields, respiratory therapy, one of them and stuff. And they're like, I'll just go be a travel nurse. So now the hospital's going to pay 2 to 3 times the amount because now you're going to pay a service for the travel service. And then they're coming in, they're getting paid stupid money and they're going back to the same hospitals. And in my head, I'm just like, why? And not that I know the details. And Doc, you probably can speak to this way better than I can. But in my head, I'm thinking, why didn't they just make a temporary contract that said during this time, we will pay you at a higher wage or give like some kind of acute bonus. I don't know, whatever it is. I never understood that. And then it put these hospitals in even worse positions.
Let me blow your mind about this just a little bit.
Blow my mind.
So my understanding in talking to some colleagues across the nation and even where I'm at, during COVID, COVID money came out to start paying nurses because they were having such a bad nursing shortage. COVID money came out to pay those nurses to go into those states and basically start helping out the ERs in the hospital. So in a sense, and I may be wrong in this, but this is my understanding. Somebody else can probably comment if they saw something different. But for many hospitals, the government was paying those nurses, not the hospitals.
Interesting.
So in a sense, they were getting paid higher wages, but it wasn't coming out of the hospital budget. It was coming out of the government budget. So in a sense, the hospitals were saving a lot of money by hiring locums or hiring those nurses instead of just paying the ones that they had.
Interesting.
So And there wasn't a doctor, I think, that was out there that did not in any way, shape, or form blame the nurses for taking a much higher pay,
Oh, absolutely
because
not.
they were
Absolutely
getting their
not.
butts kicked.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we felt. I mean, most doctors feel that nurses should make six figures,
Yeah. Well,
especially ER
most
nurses
nurses
and
feel like
ICU
that too.
nurses. Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about the type of care they're giving in the emergency department and the ICUs, they really should be making more than they're making, because it is a very critical specialty.
Yeah.
So we didn't blame any of them for leaving and taking these locum jobs. It made sense to us. But I
It
think
made
that's the
sense.
reason.
Yeah. It makes sense to me too. I mean, can't say I wouldn't have thought and done the same thing at that time.
Mhm.
Doc, where were you during COVID? What were you?
I was an emergency physician. At one of the transitions that sometimes you do, or that I did, is as I get older, I enjoy emergency medicine. I just don't like getting my ass handed to me on every shift.
Right.
So I went from level one, level two trauma centers and discovered by accident small community hospitals. And the group that I work for does a lot of the small community rural hospitals. And I went out for some shifts at these hospitals and really, really enjoyed it. Main reason was the pathology was amazing, because these are places where this is the only access a lot of people have. And because of that, they wait until they're super sick. They come in very sick. So you're using all your skills. The people are very, very nice. And it's not the typical drink by a fire hose that you would see like in a big city, those kind of things. So during COVID, I was in a community hospital close to San Antonio. And that's where I've been working ever since, actually. I've been there for about 5 years and really enjoying it. But we spent almost a year in a spacesuit when COVID
Hmm.
first started. We saw a lot of death because of COVID. I was on a phone call with doctors from all around the nation and around the world on a weekly basis, talking about what they were discovering, the things they were trying, if something was working. And we were all just trying to figure out what was going on with COVID, while the government was doing it at the same time. And I did that all in a community hospital. We were seeing quite a bit of death. We were seeing quite a bit of morbidity and mortality during that time. And, it was much worse when you're talking big city ERs. Moving patients was very difficult because all the beds were full, the ICUs were full. It was just a very trying time.
What?
Not to be a Debbie Downer, but kind of going back to that whole getting your butt kicked every shift thing. I know you went to Harvey, but did you go to Katrina too, Doc?
I was part of the Katrina, but not with the military.
Okay.
So with Katrina, I basically went with a volunteer group. But with Harvey, I was with you guys at the 149th.
Yeah, would you want to talk about that experience a little bit? What you were seeing out there and feeling along the way?
Well, there was a big difference between Harvey and Katrina. And I think this is kind of a funny story, but if they would ever erect a statue to this life-saving, what would you call them, the life-saving force of Hurricane Harvey, it would be a guy in a bath boat. Because in Yeah, because in Texas, Harvey, Harvey was a different kind of hurricane. I mean, it was a pretty big place. They had all these areas that were below floodplain
Mm.
and a lot of displaced people. Um, so it was very much a cluster. Trying to get to these people and resources to that many people is very hard. But in Texas, what I noticed was that people's houses would go underwater, so they would just grab their grill, get in their bass boat, grab their drink, and start running around saving their neighbors. So we had by far less death and less disability and morbidity and mortality, simply because people in Texas were helping each other.
Mm.
You were
So
Texans helping Texans.
yeah, their house was underwater, so they got in their boat and they went around and saved their neighbors, brought them into us. Half the time they would bring them in and they would be drunk by the time they got to us, because they were drinking and barbecuing on their bath
Hold my
boat.
beer.
On their boat, they were
Exactly.
barbecuing.
Our barbecue, yeah, they were
That's
feeding
Texas all the way.
but they were cutting open roofs and getting families out of attics. And it was not as much the military or law enforcement as it just was the people in Texas. And it was an amazing feat to watch. When we were in Beaumont, we were at a little airport there where they were doing a lot of that's kind of where the main area where we all staged out of. And we had people bringing us in so much. I've never gained weight on a deployment. I've been in Afghanistan for 2 years. I was in Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, all those places for the Air Force after 9/11. But we were in Beaumont. And I swear to God, I gained 10 pounds because we had ladies coming in and grabbing our uniforms and washing
Doing
them.
laundry.
Yeah, they were bringing us food. I mean, it was an incredible thing to watch how Texas handled a disaster. It was very different from anything I've seen in any other state.
Yeah. Didn't they
I
show
would have.
that picture that the line of trucks that were going to Houston? Do you remember seeing that? There was all these
Yep.
people and they were like bringing their RVs and their campers and their wood splitters and their lawn care stuff. And there's just this like motorcade of them that were heading there. It was incredible.
And I'll tell you who was probably the most organized was HEB. HEB was in there with
Yeah, they have a big
18
disaster
wheelers.
response team. Yeah.
They were amazing. They were better than anything I saw in the military. HEB was an amazing force in that hurricane. They were in there probably before anybody was. And they brought tractor trailers full of washer dryers, clothes, food, water, you name it. They were just in there.
So
I would love to be part of that group.
So if for the audience that's listening that's outside of Texas, HEB is our grocery store, like the
And
grocery
it's the shit.
store. Like I love our grocery store. I have a picture of me and my daughter when we got expanded to the plus size, and there's this picture of her sitting in the cart in front of 3 aisles of wine. It was the best picture ever. And I was like, I love my grocery store. And
Well,
so,
they have one of the most extensive disaster response
yes,
teams I've
that's
ever seen.
exactly.
It's crazy.
Yeah, they do a lot more than just groceries. Somebody told me they're like, the grocery store is what they're known for, but that's not actually HEB. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, they're actually real estate. They're huge real estate. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Huh.
It's an amazing
apparently.
organization.
Yeah, they do a ton of stuff, but they have a very robust response team. So yeah, there you go, HEB. Shout out. We're not even getting kickbacks for that one. So yeah. Well, I want to ask this question. There's a couple things that popped in my head. One, I want to go back just quickly to COVID. I don't want to go down the COVID rabbit hole, but there was something that caught my attention. When you were talking with all these other docs, I had a scenario where a friend of mine she was a health administrator in hospital. She was also an MSc in the military. She had called me and she said, hey, there was somebody I talked to about triage. We were talking about triaging. And we know in the military, when you say that we're doing a mass casualty triage, we flip our thinking, right? We have to conserve resources. And so it has to go to the people that are actually not as injured. Like if we think you're going to suck all that limited resources we have, unfortunately, and this is just a harsh reality, in that world, you're going to have to wait, right? So now they were facing this. Yeah, they're facing this. And she said, hey, I know you said you talked to somebody that had this protocol they were developing. Can you get your hands on it? And I said, possibly. Why? And she's like, we're trying to show this to our doctors. And they're like, no, we're not doing it. So I was just wondering because they were having a hard time with that thought process, if you saw any of that. And like I said, I don't want to go down the COVID rabbit hole, but it was just a curiosity question. The struggle that you're seeing mentally that the healthcare providers were having.
Yeah, the biggest problem that we had was there was a lot of disinformation out there. We had people showing up on CNN talking about how we're being forced not to do things that obviously are helping. You saw the doctors on the steps saying this always works. We never lost a patient.
Yeah.
And I can honestly tell you during the time that I was in the thick of it, the idea of ivermectin being that's the godsend and all this other stuff. We had people dying on it, off of it. Didn't matter if they were taking it or not. People were dying in the early stages of COVID because nobody had an immunity to COVID.
Right.
It was devastating.
Right.
And in my own personal experience, what I saw during COVID was once it started mutating, it was a lot. The mortality was a lot less. But in the beginning, when nobody had immunity to it, we just had people dying constantly, and they were dying in a terrible, terrible way.
Yeah.
Once they came out with the immunization, I personally, my experience, and I know people argue with me on the internet if they want to about it.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of warriors out there that like to Google stuff. But in my experience, when people started getting immunized, then they started having some antibody resistance to COVID where they weren't getting nearly as sick.
Right.
The big problem is that people were saying, whenever you listen to the government, you should just turn it off. They said if you get immunized, you won't get COVID.
I
We know that's not
agree.
even true. We know that's not even true with flu.
Yeah,
If you get a flu shot, it doesn't
that was a
all but
fallacy right there.
right. And so people were kind of on both sides of this. What I did see was that the protocols that we were putting in place that were people getting immunized, their morbidity and mortality went down. The people that were still dying were those that were not immunized until COVID started mutating to the point where it was basically becoming the flu. So in the early stages, everybody was dying. A little bit after that, only the people that weren't immunized were dying, and then nobody was dying.
And by
And I
that
mean,
point, we had the herd immunity.
correct,
Right.
correct. And, the idea that they were telling us that if you have, the shot was better than having COVID, nobody really believed that. That's not the way this works. We all know how immunity works for us. If
Right.
you have the COVID infection, you have immunity. If you get the shot, then you also have immunity. Whether one was better than the other, I don't think the studies really panned out like that.
No.
But I did tell you there was a lot of resistance because there was so much misinformation. It was coming from the government. It was coming from doctors. It was coming from media.
Were you
Oh
facing,
yeah,
were you guys facing the potential for, I mean, well, mass casualty was happening. Was that on the table that you had to kind of figure out where to put your resources, or was it just do the best you damn well can and shoot a couple of
yeah.
prayers up
We didn't refuse care. We were doing the same care for everybody.
across
The
the board?
problems that we were having, right? The problems we were having was beds.
Yeah.
So obviously, when everybody was getting sick, beds were full. So we were having a lot of holds in the ER. We were having a lot of ICU patients that we were managing day after day.
Yeah.
We were doing the same protocols, and the protocols obviously, as more information came out, protocols changed a little bit. What we did, and we worked extensively with ICU doctors and with hospitalists and
Yeah.
with infectious disease, and we were all on the phone in Zoom meetings talking about, and we were getting data from India, we were getting data from China, we were getting data from Russia, we were getting data from South Africa. We had all these physicians that were on these Zoom calls that were just telling us what they were doing, how it was working. And we were, people don't really realize that COVID was something brand new. None of us had ever seen anything like this. The normal stuff that we do for people in respiratory distress or infection
Didn't
were
work.
actually making things worse.
Right.
So we tended to intubate early and put people on machines, and we found out that was actually worse than letting them be hypoxic, getting
Right.
into the breathing in the 80s for long periods of time. As before, if they were 90%, 89, we were intubating them. Then we were letting them breathe at 84% saturations and staying there, putting them on high flow, staying at 84, and they were actually doing better. So this was very different than anything we had experienced in medicine in my career.
What was this doing to you guys, the physicians, the nurses, as you watched? And we'll just use COVID as the example because you've been through a lot of big things. You've been through Harvey, you've been through Katrina, your emergency
9/11.
medicine, 9/11, right?
Yep.
You've been through. So over the years, it was an interesting comment you made. You're like, I'm built for this. I love emergency medicine. I'm 20 years in it going strong, which is impressive. What keeps you intact, and what were you watching happening to other people? What was happening during these different events?
I think it's probably the same thing as being in the same situation in a military setting, in a war setting, where you're putting kids back together, where it's very intense. And some people come home intact, and some people come home with PTSD. That, I think my wiring is such that I can see probably the most gruesome things, and it doesn't affect me in the way that it affects some people where they have nightmares and those kind of things.
Right.
COVID was kind of the same thing. Basically, we were doing the best we could. I knew that every day I was going to work, I was going to try to do my best to save lives and work on the protocols and keep researching and those kind of things, to keep talking to people, trying to do our best to save our patients. But when I go home, I go home. I'm with my wife. I'm with my wife. I don't really internalize it. But some people can't do that. They actually take it in. It's not something they can let go. I think I'm just wired that way. And that may be, not everybody's like that. And it doesn't mean that somebody that isn't wired like that is less of a doctor.
No.
It's just the way people react. When I went to Afghanistan, I was there 3 times, saw some pretty horrific things. Because I taught at the medical center here at SAMC, I had pictures of pretty much everything that I saw, videos of it, because we would teach the residents how to do combat medicine. My screensaver would scare my kids and scare kids that came over to the house. They were never allowed in my office because my screensaver would pop up and it was all these pictures. But to me, this stuff it's what I'm interested in. It's what I like. It's what I see. So usually the more chaotic it gets in the ER, the more relaxed I get. And that's just the way I'm wired. So it's different for different people. I can't explain why I'm that way, but that's just the way I've always been. So the more chaotic, the more sicker the patient is, the more I relax, the more I'm thinking, the more I enjoy my job, because medicine is kind of a hobby to me. So it's a little bit different. So when I'm with like the 149th and we were in Harvey, and we were setting up the tents and we were seeing people, these are the kind of things that I just enjoy doing. Some people like to hunt, fish. I like to set up tents and take care of patients.
So let me
And
ask,
scare students.
and scare
He said,
students.
yeah, and scare
Yeah.
students. He was talking about the pictures on his phone and in his office, and instantly I was taken back to a place in time of sitting as a pupil in Doc Mac's class. We were talking about EMS calls, and in his presentation there was a photo of a bare naked ass with a pitchfork in it, and he just so nonchalantly is like, "Okay, guys, gals, what's going on in this picture? What do you see? How do you respond?" And for a group of medics that wasn't expecting it, it was memorable, and it's something I'm sure the others remember too, as far as their training. And it was just a funny moment. So when you said scary pictures, that's what it reminded me
Wait,
of.
I got two questions here. We'll hold the second one for near the end. But this one, so I'm wired a little bit like you. Probably not quite as to the degree that you are, but I don't know, people always tell me all the time, like, I forget what I've done. It sounds silly, but like I'm a very kind of move forward person. So people will be like, "Hey, do you remember when you?" And I'm like, "Did I do that?" Like I'm like, I'm moving forward, like we're off doing things. And I mean, I had an ectopic. People are gonna think I'm totally off the res when I say this one. But I did have an ectopic, and it was atypical because that's what happens when you're a nurse. So you don't ever have anything normal. And it was high up in the fallopian tube where it's stretchier, right? So, okay. End up with this atypical ectopic, and the doc, I knew him because I worked on the same floor as him. I knew him personally. So he does surgery and he knows me and he's like, "Hey, Donna, I took pictures. You want to see them?" I'm like, "Yes, let me see that." And other people would just cock their head. And years later, I was teaching college, and one of the grad students was doing, I don't remember what she was doing, but she needed some kind of unique medical pictures. And I went, "Okay, let me preface this so I don't freak you out, but I have." And then I tell her, and she was like, "You give those to me?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's kind of cool." And she's like, "Okay." Okay, so
Different
my
wiring.
kids,
yeah.
my kids actually get the worst. I have all grown kids, and they get the worst of it because I'm like sending them texts every once in a while. I say, "Hey, you want to see the worst case of genital warts I've ever seen?" They're like, "No."
No, don't send that. That's
Too
funny.
bad. Send.
But other question, when you see other people, because I mean, that was, pick one of the events, any of them. But when you see other people, are you picking up when they're starting to decompensate or when they're struggling, or do you step in to kind of keep them? Because we all know during a crisis is definitely not the time for us to fall apart, and majority of us don't. That's why we're in medicine. That's what we can do all that. But over a duration of time, like COVID, when it's just freaking the grind, were you watching people kind of fall out? Were you?
Actually, not really. I have to say that ER nurses, ICU nurses are probably some of the
They're
most
dark.
dedicated people I've ever.
They're,
Oh, they are, but they're probably the most dedicated
yeah,
people I've ever worked with. And the thing is that a lot of it, like during codes or like even in Afghanistan or places like that, really the tone is set by the leadership in the trauma. So if you're chaotic, it's going to be chaotic. If you're
agreed.
quiet, you're cool, and you're calm, people will start to relax. If I see people starting to wig in a code, I'll usually have them step out.
Yeah.
Because I really want it quiet. I want a couple things going on. We should be talking in normal voices. During COVID, I think the biggest stress was everybody was afraid they were going to get sick. And so
Some did and died.
yeah, some died. I had a friend of mine who was a physician who died, and I was exposed to it every day and I never got sick, which is really weird.
Or
Nurses that
wiring.
yeah, it probably is. Or I've been immunized by the military so much that I can pretty much snort anthrax at this
Me and
point.
MZ have a
We'll all glow
theory
in the
about
dark.
that. We have a theory about that. The theory is that between all the vaccines that were tested on us, the caffeine and the alcohol, we're preserved. There needs to be research on it. I think we're
Freaking
preserved.
immortal.
Yeah.
Do you remember all the anthrax shots? There was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
They stopped
12
them.
of them. They felt like
Still
your
feel
arm
it.
was going to fall off for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So now
Yeah,
what
I
they
think
do
I
is
got up
if
to
they
like
have it,
9.
yeah, if there's an anthrax scare, they just send us in and we just snort it like cocaine. We come out with a little powder under our nose.
You're like,
we're just
what?
I like to party.
Y'all coming? What's wrong? Yeah. I'm telling
Little
you.
bump.
I think we're all pretty much. I don't think we're going to need formaldehyde when we die. I think we're just going to be preserved forever with all the stuff that they pumped into us
They
over
can
the
go
years.
stick us on a hiking trail and we can be the sign, like up on Everest.
Vanna
Were
White.
you young enough when you went through basic or when you went through the thing to get in line where they had those air guns on each side?
I had them even.
You had it
Were
too?
you?
Not me.
Did you
Yeah.
have it? Oh my gosh! But there was like 4 guys on each side, and they were just as you were
Not
going
that I
through.
remember.
And if you were,
Oh no.
and if you were standing at the end, then you got into basic.
I think ours was earlier in the course, and I've seen older pictures of the guns that you're talking about. They still
Mhm.
have guns even, well, close to 20 years ago, but they were not the big scary like caulk gun looking things. They're a little bit smaller now,
To
but
scare
they're
you less.
definitely, yeah, they're still in action.
So
The
all the
gauntlet.
civilian side of the house and the healthcare world, when you're all whining about your flu shot, we just say,
Meh.
hold my beer because we got something much better.
Gonna get 6 shots in about 10-second duration and try to not pass out. And then at the end, ow, I
Don't
forgot about
move
that until right
either.
now.
That thing
You
will
just
slice you.
unlocked a core memory. Everybody got a shot of peanut butter and then would sit us down and say, okay, crisscross applesauce, and tilt back and forth for about 10 minutes. And now I'm trying to figure out why the hell did they
Why
give
did you
us
give you
that? Did they
peanut
just
butter?
assume?
So you couldn't
I
yell?
don't know.
Your
No, I don't know
Shoot,
why.
when I went through base, they made us run afterwards. They're like, take off. So
All right, civilian healthcare community. You got nothing on us for this.
They're like, make it make sense.
Oh my God. That's
I'm
hilarious.
curious what do you guys think about the continued COVID boosters?
Okay, so I
Oh.
have a spiel on the vaccinations, whether it's worth a tinker damn. We're going to totally get off track for a second. People come up to me all the time. Well, what do you believe in vaccinations? Do you not? And I'm like, listen, this is what I think is wrong with all of it. There's no triage system on who should or should not have it because the amount of reactions in the big picture, and I'm not saying there's not reactions, I'm just saying statistically, the number is small, right? I mean, there is reactions, but they're small. So no freaking company is going to waste their time on figuring out why they're having reactions. So we don't ever really know, right? It's just a freaking, well, let's see. So if there was like a triage system, like, oh, you have a whole family history of autoimmune disease, maybe you shouldn't get that shot. Oh, you have no family history? Well, you'd probably be prime. And that's how we build herd immunity. So That's my
Right.
speed.
You can't really blanket statement medicine with the
Yeah.
exception of our ABCs. Obviously, if there's an arterial bleed or somebody's not breathing, that's going to be the same regardless of the who part. But outside of that example, you can't really blanket statement and say this one thing is going to work for absolutely everybody. It's not realistic. You've got to look at that person as an individual, what their health history is.
hmm
There's just not
Agreed.
enough of that. That's where that stands. So I'm kind of the vaccine in general, you really have to decide for yourself. I mean, you really do, and I don't judge anybody. Did I do it? I'll tell you, I did. Yep. Did the booster too. I don't have any
Yeah, I
reactions
got
to
the.
this stuff. I don't.
hmm
That doesn't mean somebody else doesn't. And you have to decide for yourself and educate yourself, unfortunately.
Right.
It's interesting that you brought that up. That because it wasn't until after I was also pregnant too with my son. I remember getting flu and COVID and a booster right before he came, and oddly enough, that's when all of my heart stuff started happening too, passing
Mhm.
out and having arrhythmia. And I mean, prior to that, totally healthy heart, never had any problems with any of that stuff. So was it the chicken and the egg? Who knows? Is it correlated?
Who
Couldn't
knows?
say,
Was it
but
coincidence?
surely,
Yeah.
yeah, it could have been a coincidence too, but it's definitely something I've considered as a source.
And the jury is still out on all this. And,
Mhm.
the people are very, very passionate about their stance. I think the government and the media has made this so much more difficult for us
Yes, agreed.
because I had a gentleman who, and this is kind of a sad story, but this was during the height of COVID, where I had a gentleman that came in who was in respiratory distress. And I asked him if he got a COVID shot. And he quoted me something off of Fox News. I'm not really sure, but it was basically word for word. And he said, COVID's not real. And I said, has your wife, and his wife was in the next room pretty much with the same thing. And he says, no, I don't want her getting it either because COVID's not real. He died a week later
Ugh,
and she died about 3 days after that.
that's hard.
And that was a big lesson for me. For it really, it makes it very difficult. It used to be that people would talk to nurses and doctors about, what's good for their health. And doctors will not typically, at least the ones that I know, they won't typically give you it's an if or this. It's either black or white. It's always it depends.
Hmm.
And it's usually a long conversation. But for some reason, when the media gets involved, the government gets involved, all of a sudden it becomes a black or white issue. And nothing in medicine is ever black and white.
Nope.
Nothing. It's never simple to say one is best and one is not. It's always individual. And that was probably one of the hardest parts in COVID was not just dealing with the fact that we had patients dying around us and we were trying to figure out how this was working and what we should do, but also having to deal with all the disinformation and the strong opinions. And I had to get off the internet because I had people arguing with me, no medical background, but arguing with me about what I was doing and those kind of things. So it was a really strange time. COVID, I hope we never have to go through something like that again.
Wait, well, what
Not just medically, but
the Spanish flu was every 100 years, so our lifetime's
Mhm.
good. We're good, Doc. I don't know. Our grandchildren or great grandchildren. Yeah, that might be another story. Let me ask this question. So your resiliency is high. It's impressive. What do you
Mhm.
think would happen if you stop?
Well, like I told you, I turned 60 this year, and I thought about what it would be like to retire.
Yes.
I think I would go, it's in my mind, it's a little, in my mind, I've spent so much time, so much effort, so much money in doing what I do. I
You
think I've
love
got
it.
about 100. Yeah, I've got like 100 hours of CME just this year, or just for the last 12 months. And we're required far less than that for CME over 2 years. But to spend that much time in school and training and all the stuff that we have to do for licensure every 5 years, the
Mhm.
CME that we have to do, nurses being the same way, a lot of time and effort, it's hard to just give something like that up.
I agree.
It's better to stay uh, engaged in it. If you stop, I think that the time that I would consider retiring in it is when I stop engaging in medicine because it's ever changing. It's always something's always going on. If I stop reading and those kind of things, then I think I should probably get out because then you become more dangerous.
I
You're not up
agree.
to speed on therapies
like
and those kind of things.
outdated.
But
Yeah.
But yeah, and I'm nowhere near that at this point. I love reading about it. It's kind of a hobby. Anytime something new comes out, I read about it. I like listening to podcasts like yours, and a lot of the stuff's on there. I like continuing to learn. I see things. I still haven't seen everything yet. In 20 years of practice, I'm still surprised when patients come in with, you know, different things, and I've seen something for the first time that I've read about, but never. This is always happening. So it would be very, very difficult for me to get out of it at this point. And I think at some point when you're getting a little bit too old, if I get demented, probably got to take me out of the hospital. Please don't let me
I
run it.
should ask your wife this question. What do you think it would look like if he retired? And she's probably like, he's not.
Here's my honey-do list.
Yeah,
Sounds like you've still got a lot of gas in the tank, Doc.
I do. At least for now, which is that I'm thankful. But I work with good people. I work with you. I do miss the 149th for working with people like you, and it's the military is changing as well as everything else, and I'm getting to be that old cadre guy, get off my lawn, because the military is doing some weird stuff now, and I don't tolerate it really well. And so the last time we had a sexual harassment, you remember the sexual harassment training we used to have? We had to go into this room.
God, yes.
So I got
Green
kicked
dot.
out of the last. I got kicked out of the last one because I don't know if you remember this, but we were in there and I was in the back row and I tried to keep my mouth shut. So they were talking about sexual harassment, and then she, for some reason, asked, "Well, what do you think about all this?" And I go, "Well, I'm at the age where nobody really sexually harasses me. So if you're feeling like you want to, I would certainly welcome it." And the place erupted in laughter, but I'm pretty sure that I was going to get thrown in the brig there for a second. So
Well, and
Stuck in the commander's office at the end of the day. What the
Yeah,
hell
exactly.
was that?
I'm
yeah, but
sure
they can't really tell doctors anything. They can come in, they can pull me in the office. What can they do to me?
not much.
No, I definitely know.
Yeah.
It made it difficult
Well,
to keep things orderly when you've got a bunch of professionals that know that they're untouchable. Like,
yeah,
what are you going to do? What are you going to say?
Well,
we are
This
the
isn't
worst.
security forces. What are
there's
you going to do?
there's also that component in it that they just get trained, they get loaded up with this info, and then they spit it out, and then they're like, "There, you're taught," and we just check this box off that to me is not even effective. Like, I used to sit in the
Well,
back too, and I'd be like, "God,
well,
make this
we're all
end."
adults too. I mean, if you're going to be that person that does something egregious, no amount of training is going to train that out of you.
Yeah,
The
you're
rest of
trying
us
to.
are adults, and
Yeah,
the
you're
rest of us are adults. We know we're supposed to keep our hands off the enlisted and not, I mean, but we still, even in that setting, we still had people violating that. They've been through all the training. So, it's just working with a bunch of adults.
at least
It gets
trying
kind of fun.
to.
Yeah, I just got less tolerable of the things that were mandatory and having to sit in these meetings and stuff. So I don't know that I could tolerate the military anymore.
Yeah, I ran into
Yeah.
that too. I was like, okay. The end of my career was tough. The last, I'd say 5 years, I was like, all right, I think that this rodeo is over. Like, we're done. And I knew it. I didn't have it. When people ask, how do you know? I'm like, I don't know. You just know. Like, you're done with the bullshit. And I was seeing things at different levels that I was seeing the business side, and I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
this
And,
sucks.
life outside the military is great. I know
Yes.
you don't feel that way. You're kind of scared of getting out of that comfort zone and that being protected like that. But when you get out, you're like, wow, this is
It's
awesome.
pretty
This is,
nice.
yeah.
Sometimes the grass is greener.
hmm
Well, it's a different shade of green. I mean, there are things that I will miss. Now, from a nursing perspective, I go a little bonkers. I worked on a civilian floor and about lost my mind because I was a nurse manager in the military. And when y'all thought you were untouchable, I touched you. I'd be like, yeah, we're not doing C-section rates at 47%. Let's go talk. Yeah, no, we're going to talk about this. Or, there was collaboration. And I don't mean to be sarcastic, although we are sarcastic, but we had collaboration, and the single reason why, because in the military, you're not bringing in the dollars. You are there to work with us. We are there to have your back. You are there to have ours. We are there to figure things out together, right? It was a very
We have a mission together. Yep.
yeah. And
Yeah.
when somebody
Common goal.
got sassy, I mean, I had a physician, and he was an asshole. biggest asshole you met. And he was an obstetrics doc. And the only reason he was because he didn't get a general surgery rotation. And he would just play people all the time. And so he would not write his notes out. He would dictate them when he got home. So we needed information post delivery that he wouldn't put out there. And if you didn't catch him, he wouldn't tell you. This is like routine stuff, right? And so tech calls and leaves a message like, "Hey, doc, can you call in? We need to know the blood loss. We need to know this, that, and the other thing." And he calls back and he's like, "Why are you fucking wasting my time?" And I got a call at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, hell no." So the next day, and this is extreme. This is not what I saw with doctors across the board, but I went right in and I told the SGN and the SGH and I said, "You don't rein him in, I'm going to hold him on UCMJ charges for conduct unbecoming an officer." And they just looked at me and I was like, "Yeah, not
Oh,
playing."
handle that shit.
Civilian side, oh, hell no. You did not have that. Now, I'm not saying the doctors were acting like that, but we tried to close a unit. I have freaking women delivering in hallways. I'm like, "Hey, night shift nurse, I gotta close this unit." "Oh, we don't close the unit." "Excuse me? Well, just go to the OR and deliver them." "I can't." I said, "Because if I need to do a surgery, I can't have a room used up by a delivery," right? So we went round and round. Week later, same scenario, very similar happens. The doc's on the floor, pitched a fit, they closed the unit. I was done. I had my resignation in probably like a couple months later. I'm like, I cannot do this. And this right here is a massive difference between the military and the civilian side. The collaboration level on the two is very, very different. And I am sure not all hospitals are like that. And I am not putting a blanket over every civilian hospital. So please don't get me, don't think that. But damn, I felt like a number. And in the military, you're already an asset. So you already are a number. I felt less than that on the civilian side. And I was out. I'm like, that was fine. We're done. See ya.
Yeah, we do see those struggles kind of everywhere between, doctors, nurses, C-suite. I think a lot of times we have kind of the same battles. The military is a little bit different because it's not a profit kind of
Right.
thing.
Right.
Nothing is really gauged on the fact that we have to make a profit other than, because the military basically gets unlimited money in a lot of ways to
Ish.
do the
Yeah.
research and those kind of things. Hospitals are a little bit different because they do have to kind of think of the bottom line. And they're more likely to say, yeah, we can't close stuff because that's how we lose money. We have to they also have the military doesn't have necessarily the same requirements in order to keep the status that a hospital does, like a level 3 or a level
Oh,
2,
correct.
those kind of things. So
But
there's always those battles going on.
if the military didn't need us for deployment and for war, medical wouldn't exist. They would figure out a way to have us all being taken care of on the economy. They would.
Yeah.
I mean, because fiscally, and I'm not digging it. I'm just saying fiscally, it's smart, right?
Yeah.
It's
We
smart to
really
do
don't
it.
treat our veterans very well.
No.
The idea that, people that have given 20 years to the military are having to kind of work on their own or go to the VA.
It's a struggle.
It's just, yeah, it's very much a struggle, and we all deal with it pretty much on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So for the sake of time, I definitely want to talk about the concierge service, but before we do, pending your willingness, Doc, would you be willing to share a little bit about that story you mentioned when we
That
Oh,
was my
yeah.
first
second
met up?
question.
Because my curiosity is piqued on that one.
Okay.
You have to preface it though, MZ. So the whole deal was we were talking with Doc before we started the show. We were saying that jokes are encouraged. We don't take out swearing. We like to make people laugh. And he's like, "Oh, I got a story for you." And so he said a little bit and it piqued our interest. So that was going to be my second question. So you got it.
So
Great minds think
It-
alike.
if you go into any setting and you tell them you're an ER doc, what's usually the first question they ask you?
What's an awesome story? What's the craziest thing you've ever seen?
It's usually, what's the craziest thing you ever pulled out of somebody's butt? So I have quite a few of those stories, but probably one of the best ones was when I was a resident. I was with a senior resident who was a spec ops guy. He was a year ahead of me, loved him to death. And we went into a room without giving any information or HIPAA, that kind of stuff. We just went into a room for a highly ranked individual who had complained of abdominal pain, got an X-ray and realized that the guy had a dildo stuck. And
Very highly ranked.
yeah,
Like
very
the
highly
kind with
ranked.
stars or
We
Yeah,
can't.
yeah.
birds or
Well, oh, by interesting. You bring up the stars. There was a surgeon. I remember there was a guy that would come in. He used to be a 3-star, I believe, and he had a cardiac bypass done. And the surgeon, I guess, was an amazing guy and ended up doing the takedowns in the shape of stars. So when you looked at his heart, you saw 3 takedowns from the cardiac bypass. There were 3 stars on his heart.
Oh,
It's
that
pretty
is
interesting.
awesome.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. I don't know how they did it, but they did it. But anyway, this guy, I went in with the special ops guy, and I've got coffee and my chart, and I'm writing the chart. He's talking to him. The first thing he says to him, he says, "Well, sir," he says, "I see you've got this dildo in your ass." He said, "Do you want me to take it out or just change the batteries?" And I literally spit my coffee all over the wall.
Oh my
And
God.
and
oh my god.
this guy goes, "I don't think that's funny." He goes, "That's all right, sir. We'll get it out for you." And I walked out the room with him. I said, "Aren't you afraid of getting in trouble?" He goes, "Who the fuck's he going to tell?"
Right. Who is he going to tell? Exactly.
Just
Yeah,
change the batteries and keep it moving. You
yeah,
saw
exactly.
nothing.
Yeah,
Wow. My
we've
God.
taken out light bulbs, cell phones. What else?
Did he fall on it, Doc? Is that what happened?
Uh,
He fell?
Oh, fall
no,
on him.
the light bulb. Yeah,
Well,
I had a
either
guy.
one.
I actually had a guy that came in with a light bulb in his butt, and my daughter at the time was my scribe. This was on the civilian side, and he gave this story. And my daughter's like I am. Gave the story. Yeah, I fell off the roof. And my daughter stops right, looks up, and she goes, "Yeah, you fell off the roof naked." And
And
the
in
guy
that
goes,
way?
and he goes, "Yeah, I see your point." I said, "Man, don't lie to us. Just tell us what you did." We had 3 of them up there. I saw Sylvania 60 watt. It was
Like, we
crazy.
don't
I wanted
care.
to.
That
I
was
wanted
not
to
a bright
shock the.
idea.
I wanted to turn the lights off and shock the guy and see if I can get his butt to flash. That would have been awesome.
Say cheese.
The lighter side of the military. I mean, of medicine, period. Oh, my
Yeah, especially
Lord.
emergency medicine.
Yeah. God, you see it all. I
Mm-hmm.
see it
You'd be
all.
surprised.
Hashtag they fell on it.
It is. That's what everybody says. I fell on it. I
I
Mhm.
don't know
mean,
what happened.
I
I
think
don't
one
know
of
how
the
it got
cutest
there.
ones we had, I say cute, it was hilarious. We had one of our docs.
Is this about a gerbil?
No, 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 no.
Okay.
This was
Just making sure.
I've
a
had one of
resident
those. Yeah.
who
Mhm.
we had our intern. Intern was seeing this lady, it was OB patient, and this is military, so her husband's deployed. I preface that. And the next thing I noticed was this pattern. She like kept coming in. She would be like, "Is Dr. V here?" And I would be like, "Yeah, he's on shift." "Oh, okay." This was going on for like probably once a week. And she would be like, "Is he going to check me?" Oh my God, we were dying. And so I'd come out and I'd be like, "Scotty." He would be like, "No, you do the check." "Oh, I can't. I'm sorry. She asked for the doctor." Like, "You can do the exam." "Sorry."
They do exist. Those people that are on those shows that you think there's no way. They do
They
exist.
do
And they come out at
exist.
2 in the morning. 2
Oh
in the
my
morning.
God,
Always.
hilarious. She wanted him to come in and check her, and I
Mm.
obliged every time I was on. He hated that.
Hi, Doc.
It was cute. Oh well. All right. Let's wrap this up. We went a little everywhere, but I think the biggest thing that I took away from this was this transition part. And if anything I can say, Doc, listening to you, was that you said it 2 or 3 times that medicine was your hobby. Like you find enjoyment. Like when we do hobbies, it's things that we find enjoyment in, right? So I enjoy
Mhm.
playing a musical instrument, I enjoy painting, whatever that may be. You enjoy this. You don't look at it as your job. And I kind of wonder if that has something to do with the whole wiring, like because you find this enjoyment and it's learning and you're kind of just very almost innocent about it, like, wow, I learned something new kind of thing. If that kind of helps your processing of it, like,
Yeah, I think the thing that probably makes medicine most enjoyable is the ability to teach. And when you're with students and techs and sergeants and they just want to learn, I think it's the people that make it enjoyable. The concierge side of it is that as I get older, I'm looking at ways of kind of emergency medicine is basically problem solution, problem solution. You see a patient for 10, 15 minutes, you work them up, you diagnose them, you treat them, and then they go home. You may see them again in the ER, but you're not doing any continuity. The concierge part of it is my way of kind of adding to my experience of continuity with patients. So what I do is I take on a small number of patients and I become their doctor. They have 24-hour access to me and my cell phone. I have my own EMR and those kind of things to take care of them. And that's just another aspect of medicine that is a little bit different from emergency medicine, where you're dealing with the acute phase, but you're also dealing with people that are needing help on, and you get to know them a little bit more. So the great thing about medicine is you can take it pretty much any direction you want to go, especially in emergency medicine. You don't become pigeonholed in one specific, just an ER doctor. You can do EMS, you can be an EMS director, work at a fire station. I work with some really great people at District 7. Being around the paramedics is great. Teaching here is great. We do get medical students in, we get to teach them as well. So it's a lot of fun to take something that you're very good at and kind of bring it to the next generation. The interesting thing is I'm a little bit embarrassed to tell you this, but my staff makes fun of me as well, is when I'm on shift and it's slow, I'm watching like ER. I'm actually watching those shows and they asked, why do you watch this? I said, I'm trying to figure out what they're doing wrong.
That's
And
awesome.
my
You're
kids will
sharpening
not
yourself.
watch.
You need to go
My kids won't.
consult.
Yeah, my kids won't watch. What is that one?
Grey's Anatomy.
No, it's the doctor. It's kind of a dick.
Oh,
You know what I'm
House.
talking about?
House, yeah.
I love
They
that
won't
show.
watch that with me because in 5 minutes I've already diagnosed them. And they're like, I'll
Nice.
say, yeah, it's this. And they're like, shut up, Dad.
Like, you're
So
no
they won't
fun.
watch House with me. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
go ahead. No, I was just gonna say it's interesting to hear that side of it from being a student in those scenarios that Doc was just talking about, and getting to have that clinical knowledge poured into me with Doc, with Scotty Bulliter that we had interviewed here a few weeks back.
I was just gonna say, have you ever been to the Health Science
Oh,
Center?
yeah.
Yeah, Scotty. I know
Yeah, he
Scotty
knows.
very well.
That
Yeah.
was
Yep,
great.
so
We actually teach. We bring the paramedics in once a year for cadaver training.
Nice.
So I've known Scotty for years. He's a
Nice.
great guy.
Yeah, he is a
we
great
love
guy.
you, Scotty.
Shout
It's just
out.
kind of humbling to be on this side of it and think of it that way. How lucky I've been to have teachers like you that kind of paved the way, and really lucky in that sense that you did share with us, and not just in the cheesy here's your PowerPoint way of doing it that we usually get. But it's clear to me that people like you, people like Scotty, you're excited about it and you
Mhm.
believe in it, and you're very passionate, which makes it fun for your listeners.
Not to mention we're a little weird, which makes it even more interesting.
Yeah, we like weird.
I like
though.
your weird.
We
I
like
your
weird. What is the name? So the concierge service, basically you're going from acute medicine to preventative medicine. And this is now, so you don't see them in the ER.
No, I'm still in the ER.
I know, but I just meant when you have concierge service, now you're
Right.
going to more, hopefully, preventative medicine. Is that correct, with
Right.
the concierge service?
Correct.
And what's the
Correct.
name of the
Yeah.
service? We'll give a shout out here.
It's called Oasis Oaks Concierge Medicine.
Oh, fancy.
Yeah.
Are you
Yeah.
out in Stone Oak where all the fancy people are?
No,
Oh,
I'm just me.
you're
It's just
you.
me. Just me.
Just Doc.
Yep.
We might have to hook up here and see how he can make us unbroken. You'd be like, there's no help.
There is
Forget
no
it.
fixing you.
That's right.
Being broken is fun. Just
Oh,
gives you an excuse. I'm sorry, I can't do that. I'm broken. Can't do
yeah,
it.
sorry.
We put the fun in dysfunctional. I wouldn't change it. I like
I
it.
wouldn't either.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah,
Well, you guys are amazing. I appreciate you letting me on your podcast. I really feel like I'm probably the least interesting person you've had on here, knowing all the people that you've interviewed. But I really appreciate your time. I like what you guys are doing. I think your podcast is great. I'll be listening to it pretty much from now on every day whenever you do it. So
We're not going to
I
make
really
you
appreciate what you guys
smarter,
do.
but we'll make you laugh.
we
Exactly.
might drop your IQ a point or two by the end of the episode, but damn it, you're gonna have fun and you're gonna smile.
There you go.
And that's the point. That is the point. All right. Any last words, MZ?
No, thanks, Doc. It's been a treat having you on, and good to see your face. And who knows? Maybe we can do another show in the future, bring some of your firefighters in and hear what they have to
He
share with
was
us too.
supposed to have them stripping in the background, and it
Yeah,
didn't come
we'll bring them in
through.
Womp womp
shirtless.
womp.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, when you
Mm.
guys go famous, I want to ride on your airplane. Okay.
Oh,
Hell yeah.
that sounds good. We're manifesting that right now. So,
You can be our concierge doc on the plane.
There
oh,
you go.
yes.
There you go.
Look, Cindy, we have a private dock now. We've been manifesting this airplane.
We'll manifest that, yes.
Hell yeah.
There you go.
All right, everybody. From all of us here at Bullets to Bedpans, we're done for the week. We just want to thank everybody. Please share, like, do all that social media stuff that we suck at, but we really hope that you can help us out with. And so you guys have a great week. And from MZ and Detox, peace out.
Adios.